And get started. Again, welcome to the 2021-2022 follow-up report webinar. My name is Doug Wiesner. I am with PTD Technology, and I'll be your presenter today, or one of them. I'd like to start off. We have Enchen Yi here from the Office of Career and Technical Education, OCTE, and she would like to give a short presentation to start off with. So, Enchen, let me make you a presenter. And I believe that should be good. And I will switch over to your slides. And if you're good to go ahead and see.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me, Doc?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, good. So thank you very much for participating in this year's follow-up training, and thank you, Doc, PTD, for organizing the training. Could you go to the second slide, please? So I appreciate everyone who working on the follow-up survey projects, and I do appreciate your efforts to reach out all the students and finish the surveys. So just a very short presentation to mention what is going on for this year's follow-up and some changes and some updates. So just to remind you, the main purpose of the follow-up survey project is to collect one of the Perkins Core Performance Indicator, the post-program placement through the survey. The new 3S one. And in addition to the federal Perkins accountability requirement, the follow-up survey data is also used to various state level as well as local level for the CTE programs evaluation, and also show the impact of the state funding. So the follow-up survey has many uses of the data. Go to next slide, please. And this is a very brief overview of the last 2 years data. I think both of them are available on the CTEIS website. Both in CTEIS or in the CTEIS public report website. So as you can see, last 2019-20 and 2021, we both achieved a very good response rate, over 85%. And the placement rate since 2021 is the first year right after the pandemic. So as you know that we have proposed to lower our state target for the 3S one. Because of the COVID pandemic effect. So the current target for 2021 school year is only 75%. So as you can see, even we have got a slightly lower than our previous like 95%, but we still achieved our proposed new target. And the employment rate is compared to the 2021 to the 1920 is almost the same, very similar, but the continuing education has decreased a little bit. So when we proposing the new 3S1 target, back to last year, right after the pandemic, we have done some research and showing the post-secondary enrollment has kind of significantly affected by the COVID situation. So as we heard from some of the local school, and we also done like a national quantitative research-based to see. So that informed us. So this post-secondary enrollment going to be lower because of the COVID. So this did not surprise us. So here's just an overview of the data we've got last 2 years. Next slide, please. So here I just want to highlight the importance of the response rate. So as you all know that the response rate of the follow-up data is one of the most important quality showing the 3S1 post-program placement indicator. So to achieve a good response rate, that means we need to make a good faith effort to survey all qualified concentrators, which is the, everyone on your follow-up list, as well as a good response rate to accurately portray all concentrators in the state. Because for the federal legislation requirement, we have to survey all concentrators. So to achieve a high or a good response rate is very important to fit that requirement. And also the value of the data collected through the follow-up survey depends on an accurate report of the status of all concentrators. So if a good response rate is necessary to accurately portray all concentrators in the state. So back to, I think a few years ago, verification studies have shown that low response rate often underreport their placement rate because they failed to reach the students who were employed or enrolled in continuing education during regular weekdays. Next slide, please. So here, if a building or CPET has got a low response rate, that might negatively affect the building's CPETs or the state by reducing the accuracy of the placement information that is going to be used to evaluate the CTE program's findings. So we have put this kind of requirement in the follow-up protocol manual. So any buildings or institutions with response rate below 80% may be found to be in non-compliance during a track on-site monitoring visit. And also any CPET with lower than 80%, this is one of our risk analysis for the track on-site monitoring visit. And also district with one or more buildings with response rate below 50% needs to be required to send a representative to a technical assistance workshop before next follow-up survey. So they have to attend the follow-up workshop if any of the buildings have a low response rate before next follow-up survey. So next slide, please. So here I put some tips that actually I copied from our protocol manual, which is at the very end, the link that you can, so PDD have collected and also the OCT have collected some kind of useful tips that might be useful to reach more students, like when to call and use answering machine, etc. So if you are new or to the follow-up project, that might be very helpful. So I highly recommend you to read through the follow-up protocol manual to find these helpful tips to kind of increase the response rate. So next slide, please. And here I have added some new things that we did not mention in last year. So the proxy rate. So actually this year, so 2021 school year, right after the 2021 school year follow-up survey study, PTD and OCTE have done a validation study that some of you may heard of that right after the main follow-up survey. So back to this spring, like from February to summer. So PTD have repeat to sampling some students, including the respondents and the non-respondents. Non-respondents means the students who haven't been reached in the main survey, main follow-up survey. So here I just showed you one of the kind of notable findings from that validation study. So that is saying that we have compared directly the student responses to the from the original follow-up survey to the validation study responses. So we found that more often the main survey was completed by a proxy in most so we have found that the study difference from the responses to the main survey more often when the main survey was completed by a proxy. So that means proxy answers are showing more variance between when we compare the proxy versus the student responses. So in the table, as you can see, the number of wrong column means, so we have compared the 5 main questions in our X0160 reports, which is the main response rate, the continuing education rate, the employment rate, and the related placement rate. So the main 5 questions. And the number of wrong means when we compare the main follow-up survey versus the validation study, which we repeated the sampling, how many number of those question items are answered differently. So that's why we use the wrong here. So as you can see, when we compare the students' responses, most over like 50% are 4 in 0 or 1 number of item questions are different. But the majority of them are so that means majority of them are the answers of these 5 questions are the same. But on the right side of this table, as you can see, we compare the proxy responses from the main survey to the validation study. Over 50% falls to the numbers 4 or 5. That means 4 or 5 out of 5 total. Majority of the item questions are answered different when we compare the proxy versus students' responses. So that means the proxy answers fails to accurately match the students' answers at a much higher rate. Yeah, I'm reading some questions from the chat. Yep, so this is one of the notable findings from the validation study I want to share with you. It seems that proxy responses is less accurate as the student responses. So next slide, please. So based on that findings, we're gonna change or modify our policies because of that. So all this gonna be shared in next week in our fall update, and also a memo about these changes policies will be sent out soon. So you probably the first audience to hear that. So as you know, that we don't have any like a requirement as we did to the response rate, but now we do want to have some actions because we want to lower the proxy rate. So buildings with proxy rate higher than 20% will be required to attend a follow-up training before the next follow-up survey, similar as the response rate. So this will be included in the follow-up protocol manual, and these buildings will receive a letter indicating the requirement. And this will be implemented to 21-22, which is the current year follow-up survey. So next spring, you will hear that if you need to attend the follow-up workshop, if your buildings have proxy rate higher than 20%. And also, yes, the old proxy rate requirement was around like 30%. Now we want to lower that because we find the proxy answers is not accurate as we thought before. So the other two changes of the requirement is all related to the track on-site monitoring. So the proxy rate requirement for the track risk analysis and the compliance finding will be reduced too. For the track risk analysis, proxy rate threshold will be lowered to 20%. Yeah, the older threshold is 30%, but now we lowered to 20%. And regions have one or more buildings with a proxy rate greater than 20% will be flagged on the risk analysis too. And for the track on-site visit, regions that have a regional proxy rate higher than 20% will receive a finding of non-compliance and be required to prepare for a compliance plan. So yeah, like I said, all these changes will be implemented starting for this year, the 21-22 school year, using the 21-22 follow-up data. So all this will be started next spring, right after this year's follow-up survey. So next slide, please. Yeah, I think that's all I want to share with you, some updates about the follow-up. So if you have any questions, do not hesitate to contact me. So I hear since we work from home 4 days a week, so I do prefer you contact me through the cell phone, put it here, or email. Yeah, I'm reading the questions from the chat. So this changing policy will be shared, like I said, next week's full update, and a memo mentioned this will also be sent out, I think, pretty soon, this or next week.
It sounds like that's good information. Thank you, In-Chen. We can continue on. I will switch over to my presentation. And again, we're going to be talking about the 21-22 follow-up report. As I said before, my name is Doug Wiesner. I am the project manager with PTD Technology and we are the main support vendor for CTEIS. And so I will be your presenter today. To start off with, Just again, repeat a little bit of what In-Chen said about the purpose. The follow-up report is a survey of CTE program concentrators. It focuses on their students' continued use of CTE skills after they leave secondary education. So in other words, it just goes and asks, are they using the skills that they learned in high school, and some other information about the jobs or what they're doing after school. And as she mentioned, it's very important. The data set that we collect is primarily used to provide data for the Perkins 5 Core Performance Indicator, this year's 3S1 placement. It's also important to assist in program review, and it's very informative to find out what students are doing after they leave school, after they've attended one of your programs. It's also involved in some other areas, so it's very important that you participate, and as she mentioned, that you get as accurate as information as possible, so that you get your response rates up and your proxy rates down. So looking at the timeline, the follow-up starts in early October, and this is kind of what we're doing now. First thing we do is we put all the materials together and we send them out to all the CPED administrators and any individual that has participated in follow-up in the past. We also will post it on our knowledge base at support.ctis.com, and I'll take a minute to show you. And then the districts begin their survey data collection. One of the questions in the chat is, has the follow-up started yet? And as a matter of fact, we are just finishing up our last little bits of checks in the plan. We've assembled our follow-up list, and the follow-up list is a list of all the students who have left school and were concentrators in a program. And we're getting ready to post that. And as soon as this meeting is over, this webinar is over, probably just after lunch, we are going to be publishing the follow-up list out, so that everybody, when they go to the follow-up site, they will see their lists loaded. We were just testing a few things this morning. It's been a busy fall, as you can all imagine, and so we're getting that done. It will be out right after lunch, so you can take it, look for it there. Another question was the PowerPoint slides. These all can be found on the knowledge base, and I will show you in a minute where you can find that. So to continue, you actually conduct your surveys between October and January. And January 6th is when you need to have all of your surveys completed and submitted to your CPED administrator for review. If at that point that you're unable to do it for some reason, you need to contact In-Chen at OCTE and put together a plan into how you intend to complete your surveys. By January 13th, the CPED administrators need to have reviewed all of the follow-up data and have it submitted to OCTE. And then once we have all of the district's data, and we meet all, in order for us to do the reports, we need to have every building submitted. Once we get all of that data in, then we can do the calculations and run the reports and produce the 610 and the 611, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But those are the follow-up reports. And as I mentioned, I will share with you all the resources that are available in just a minute. Okay, so the follow-up to gather all this information, first off, the district officials, whether it be yourselves or teachers, will be gathering the survey data from the CTE concentrators from the previous year. And again, this will begin today. There's a question, when do you start the survey data collection? It will begin today, but you can't begin until we release the follow-up list. And we're going to release the follow-up list this afternoon or right after lunch. So that's when you begin. So you're going to collect all the information from the CTEIS concentrators, and a concentrator is any student that earned 8 or more segments in a CTE program. And for this round of the follow-up, we're looking at last year where we only use segments to determine concentrators. However, in the coming years, that will be expanded to include competencies in PCCs. But this year, it's only segments. And they also have to have left school. We look at wage earning. We're only looking at wage earning. We don't look at family and consumer science or any of the new and emerging programs. However, both regular and early middle college programs are expected to have the follow-up completed. You're strongly encouraged to do your surveys by telephone, as we have found over the many years we've been doing this, that is the most successful. You do have the option to mail surveys. However, the success rate and the cost of that might be something to consider. We also have a student self-survey, which I'll talk a little bit later on as an option. Once you've collected all your surveys, you will enter them into CTEIS, and then it's compiled. And as I said before, once we have the entire state's worth of data, we can do our calculations and we produce our reports. And that's after all the data has been submitted first to the level 5 fiscal agencies, and then onto the CPID, and then onto OCTE at the state. To assist you in conducting your follow-up surveys, OCTE provides the Survey Support Center, which is us here at PTD Technology, to facilitate your survey and assist in making sure all your data is accurately collected. And we at PTD Technology are the vendor to support CTEIS. We develop and update the software that you will be using to do your follow-up report, data collection, and submission. We provide advice in conducting efficient, effective follow-up surveys. We're there to answer all related questions on the survey forms and the data entry. We help solve all sorts of problems. Again, we've had many, many years of experience and might be able to help you with any of your problems. We also provide these webinar trainings, and we provide all the manual updates. If you do need assistance, there's really 2 types of assistance. If you're looking for technical help, and these are questions regarding the survey forms, how to enter the data, how to read the data, or anything along those lines, you can call the PTD help desk or email at these numbers here. However, if you have questions about policy, in other words, you know, how do I ask this question, or stuff like that, or have suggestions regarding the follow-up, then you need to talk to OCTE, and Inchen is the one that you would talk to over at OCTE. So if it's technical, call PTD, and if it's policy, then talk to OCTE. So to help make sure everyone can understand the whole process, we've broken it down into a series of steps. And we feel that if you follow these steps, then you should be able to make sure that all the work gets done properly, and you should be able to complete your reports in a efficient and timely manner. Step 1 is to review the follow-up packet. And the follow-up packet is a collection of documents that support and provide the information you need to do the follow-up survey. It includes 2 memos, one from OCT and one from the Survey Support Center. These memos introduce the follow-up project, cover the state's reporting goals, and then announce the submission deadlines for the year, and also provide you with the justification for calling the students. There's also a workshop schedule, which contains all the training information, for instance, this class here. And then there's 2 manuals. The first one is the protocol manual, which instructs users on how to collect data, how to ask the survey questions, how to complete the forms. It explains all the reasoning behind all the questions, how the survey progresses from question to question, what the dependency of questions are. If this particular question is asked, then do you ask this question or that question? It also has information in there on how to improve your contact rates and your proxy rates. As In-Chen Men, there's some guides and some tips in there on how to make sure you contact your students. The other manual is the instructional guide, and that is the guide on how you take all of your survey data and enter it into CTEIS, and any issues that you may run into doing that. As we'll see in a minute, when you enter data into CTEIS, it is designed to follow the protocol guide so that if certain questions are answered, then others need to be answered or others need to be skipped. And it will expect that you follow that. It also contains, the support information and how to contact or get assistance from the help desk. And once your data is all submitted, it provides some guidance on how to finalize your reports and submit them. In addition to that, you will find 4 other remaining documents. One is an intro script, and this is the scripts that you will be using to introduce yourself to the student, identify the student and which programs they're taking, and also determine what type of survey is going to happen. There's several different types of surveys. If you're talking to the student directly, you'll be doing a student survey, and this assumes that you're talking to them on a phone. You can have a proxy survey, in which case you'll be talking to a relative or someone who knows the student well enough to answer for them, presumably also on the phone. You also have mail surveys that if you choose to mail out printed surveys that instruct on how to have a student fill out the printed survey. There's a 4th type of survey that doesn't have a script, and that is the self-survey, and which students, it's kind of like a mail survey, but they actually go to a website, sign in, and follow the prompts on the website to complete the survey. And again, we'll talk a little bit about that later. So all this information, again, is put together in a follow-up packet. And if you've done the survey in the past, you're on our mailing list and you will get the updated packet. If you're a CPID administrator, you get the packet. If you're new to follow-up and you have not received a packet, you can talk to your CPID administrator to find out, and have them forward on a packet to you. Or you can go to the CTEIS knowledge base at support.cteis.com. And I can show you how to do that here in just a sec. So I'm going to pop over to here. So this is the PTD CTEIS training site. And so we'll be using this, but this is a model of what the production site is. And you can, as a CTEIS user, you can use the training site to try and practice what you want to do ahead of time. You log into it with the same credentials that you log into with the regular CTEIS site. If you're having some issues with that, contact the help desk and we can help you with that. But for now, what I want to point out is on the site, you'll see that you'll have, it will tell you what the follow-up due dates are. So you can always look to there to see when they're due. You can always go to this little window here. It talks about training. And so if you want to train for an upcoming or find out when upcoming trainings are, you can click on this and it'll take you to where you can register for training. And down here at the bottom, you have quick links to the knowledge base, and you can click on follow-up here, and that will take you to the follow-up page in the knowledge base. If you Your other choice is you can just type in support.cetis.com. And this will take you to the front page of the knowledge base where, as you can see, we have information about all aspects of CTEIS. But if you're interested in follow-up, you can come down here and click on the follow-up quick link, or you can come to the menu here and then click on the follow-up link here. And this has all the information that you'll find in the packet, including additional information. It has the instructional guide, which is the one I mentioned, which will instruct you on how to enter your data into CTEIS. It has the protocol manual. And if I click on the protocol manual, this is the protocol manual for this year. And you can see it has a lot of information about the nature and the reasons for doing the follow-up. And then it gets into some how to actually conduct the follow-up survey, some of the things you want to be thinking about, how to make contact, important tips. And then it gets into the follow-up script, the introductory script, which we'll talk about in a minute, explains on how to use that. And then it will step you through each question in the survey, talking, letting you know about the purpose, the expectations, how it's coded, explanations of maybe some finer points on here. Some of the response, as I said, there's some dependencies. If you answer these particular questions, and these other questions will be answered or asked or answered for you, and how the data is used. And it goes through all of that. So it's really important that you spend some time and review, especially if you're new to follow-up, review the protocol manual to really understand what the purpose is and how it works. And you really want to have this this understanding before you start interviewing anybody, so that you don't suddenly halfway through an interview have a question about, which direction am I supposed to be going? So that is the protocol manual, and that is available to you. We also have this PowerPoint that I'm working on right now. It can be found here. In Chen's OCTE PowerPoint is right there. We have videos that are available, so that if you want to review this particular webinar, if you want to look at it at your own speed, you can redo the video. If you're a fiscal agent or a CPID, we have some guides for you. We also have the self-survey guide, which I'll again touch on a little bit. We also have the scripts. We have the intro scripts, the survey form, the student survey form, the proxy survey form, and the mail survey form, which I alluded to a minute ago. And then you have some other general information. You have the memos that I referred to, and the schedule, and some FAQs. Lastly, you have all of the end reports access. These are the guides that explain the reports. These are not actually the reports themselves. These are just the guides. So once you look at the 610 and you want to know what all the different fields mean, you can look into there. And we'll talk about the reports again a little bit later. So this is your hopefully first stop for information. If you ever have any questions, or curious to know what's going on, or need reference material, this is where you want to go. And again, you can get here by going to support.cetis.com and then clicking on the follow-up link, or you can do it from the home page by just scrolling down to the bottom to the documentation links, the quick links to the documentation. All right. So we've reviewed the follow-up packet, so we've gotten that step done. So the next thing you want to do is access your follow-up student listing. And then, as I referred to earlier, your follow-up student list is the list of all your students who have left school as a concentrator. They may have gone on to complete it. Basically, a concentrator is someone who is participated in the majority of the programming of the program material, and may or may not have completed that. The CTEIS application every year will generate the follow-up list for you. So we go through and look at all of last year's data and identify all the students that have left school based on the MSDS reporting and all the students that had reached concentrator status. To take a look at what your student follow-up list is, I'm going to switch back over to, okay, so we're back to the training site. So the first thing you need to do to get into CTEIS to be able to look at your follow-up list is be able to log in. And if you're new to CTEIS, you will need to have a CTEIS login. And the first thing you need for that is a MEIS account. And once you get a MEIS account, you need to contact your fiscal agent and have them connect your MEIS account into CTEIS. And once you do that, you can come in and you can log in. And depending on what kind of responsibilities you've been given in CTEIS, you'll have a variety of different menu options. But typically you'll be given a data entry task, and that will include either enrollment, follow-up, or expenditures. We're only concerned about follow-up. If you've only been granted or expected to work on follow-up, you will just see this section here on follow-up. If you're doing follow-up, enrollment, and or expenditures, you'll see these additional columns. But to start off, we want to go just to the follow-up. And what this will do is the follow-up is collected and submitted and aggregated and initially reported on by building. So you will see a list of all the buildings that you've been assigned. And in this list, it'll give you what the fiscal agency it belongs in, what the building name and number is, and how many students. And yes, the question is, should we be seeing anything in a moment? And again, no, we will be releasing that releasing the follow-up list right after lunch today. So you will not be able to see anything till lunch. We will send out a listserv that says that you can, that the follow-up list has been released and that you can get started. And we're just doing a few last minute things. I'd hoped to have it before we started this morning, but there was just one thing I wanted to check and didn't want to rush it. So it will be released right after lunch. The other question was about the logins. We will be, right now, our logins are managed through MEIS, the Michigan Education Information System, I think. And for the lifespan of follow-up, assuming that you have it all completed by January 15th or 13th or whatever the date was, you will continue to use your MEIS login. There is a plan to switch over to My Login, which is the state's new federated login system. And we wanted to do that in a quiet time. So we've plan on doing it in February when it kind of gets a little bit more quiet. There's no immediate reports being done. It's just after the follow-up. So if you're on time and get everything done on time, then you should only be using your MEIS login for the duration of this year's follow-up. Okay. So looking again at the follow-up list. So this is a list of buildings that you've been assigned. And again, at these, if you're a building reporter, you may only be assigned one building, or maybe, you're being assigned several, but it's all done by building. And you have a couple options here. You can take a look at all of your students. If you click on the phone here, it will open up and give you a list of all your students and the program that they were in, and their UIC and their name, and their PSN and their current status. And right now you can see this particular student has a comp NC, which means he was a non-contact and for some reason he was unable to be contacted. This one is a comp, meaning the student has had a completed survey. All the rest of these are INIT, which means initial, which means that they are in the initial stage of their follow-up, which basically means they have not been followed up at all. Another option that you will see here is self, which indicates that a student has completed a self-survey. So this will give you a list of all the students in a building. And we'll take a look at this a little bit later when we actually start recording our surveys. But you may look at that list and say, well, I've got some students on here that graduated from in a program and I'm not seeing them. Students are only to be followed up once in one program. So if a student attended or was a member of multiple programs, the CTEIS application will pick a primary program for them to be followed up in. And it's entirely possible that if that student attended programs in more than one building, in more than one district, then they may be being followed up somewhere else. The unduplication process may have chosen a different program to have them be followed up in which case the owners of that program would be doing the following up. And if you're missing students and wondering where they are, you can use this completers of the CADR or concentrators or completers or candidates in another district report. So if I click on that, I will get a report. And these are all the students. It's kind of smashed together here, but I can export this to Excel so I can see it a little bit better. And it will list all of the students that are being followed up in another district. And it will, this second half over here tells what the district is and what the program is that they're being followed up in. So this helps you make sure you do a full accounting of all your students. That way, again, you want to make sure that all your students are accounted for and followed up on if they're required to. And if you're expecting to have 100 students to follow up on and you only see 90, you can use this report to verify that the other 10 were being followed up somewhere else. And if they're not, then you maybe want to contact the help desk and say, hey, I've got some missing follow-up students. And, we can figure out what it is that made them not show up on their follow-up list and possibly remedy that if necessary. You can also get a complete listing of your follow-up students. We have a printed report for the follow-up slips. Unfortunately, with the conversion from Perkins 4 to Perkins 5, that required some design changes to this one, and it's not quite ready yet. It's almost ready. We're in final testing of it, and we hope to have this follow-up list report available within a week or so. And that one is a printed report that allows you to see your follow-up students and the programs that they're involved in. In the meantime, we have a follow-up list export. So if I choose which building I'm interested in and then hit the follow-up list export, I will get a grid like this, which then allows me to export that to Excel. And it will pop up all of my students, all of their programs, and give me the listing. It will also indicate what their current status is, and if they were surveyed, what the date was. So this information is available to you so that you can determine which students need to be followed up per building. So this is basically your follow-up list. And when people say that I want to get my follow-up list, I want to find out who my students are, this is how you get it. All right. So we talked about that. Again, logging in, you need to have a MEIS account. And once you have a MEIS account, you talk to your fiscal agency authorized official. And as I've said before, for this session of the follow-up or this year's follow-up, you will be only using your MEIS login. However, if you are continuing and doing other tasks within CTEIS, sometime in February, you will be expected to transition into my login. And as we get closer to that date, we will provide you with more information and more instruction and more steps in what you need to do to make sure that you can continue to do what you need to do in CTEIS with no interruption. Okay. So you want to, we've talked about how to take a look at your follow-up list, and you want to review it. Again, you want to make sure that you have all of your concentrators on it, all the students that have reached 8 segments or more and left school that year. You will be expected to follow up on all the students that are identified on the follow-up list. And again, if a student completes programs in multiple districts, only one district will be expected to follow them up. And if you're missing students, you can check them out on the completers in another district report. And as always, if you're missing students or you have students that shouldn't be on the list, if for some reason you see students on your list that you say, hey, that kid's still in school, be sure to contact OCTE or the help desk, and we can help resolve that and figure out what that student is supposed to do and supposed to be. Okay. The next step is to actually conduct the survey. And again, there's several different ways that you can conduct your surveys. It is highly encouraged that you call and speak to the student directly. As you can imagine, that is the best way to get the most accurate data. However, if that is difficult, you can use proxy, you can use email, or you can use the self-survey. The one thing that's you need to keep in mind that if you may send out emails or links to the self-survey, and if the students choose not to follow up or to use those links and do the follow-up that way, you are still responsible to try and contact them another way. So if your mail doesn't work, then you at some point will need to call them or attempt to call them. Okay. And to prepare to do the surveys, it's suggested that you take your packet and you create multiple copies of your scripts and the surveys so that you have them ready. You could even prepare ahead of time by preloading the names of students and their programs onto the scripts, and we'll see how you can do that. And make sure that you have the appropriate intros. And to be sure that you're ready so that when you actually are on the phone and you're talking to a student, you don't have to suddenly try and find something. As I mentioned, there's an additional way of doing a survey, and that is the self-survey. When you print out the follow-up list, you will get a follow-up list ID, which you can then create an email and include that ID for each student and do like a mail merge, if you would, so that every student has the appropriate student ID. Send that to the students, and that will provide them the link to the studentfollowup.ctis.com. And hopefully the student will follow that link and use that to conduct the self-survey. The question is, the content and process for the self-survey exactly the same as last year? Yes, it's pretty much the entire, for the most part, the survey process has been consistent from last year to this year. But just to switch back over to here, if you do the follow-up list export and export that to Excel and open that up, which is right here. And if you scroll to this line here, you'll see that there is the survey pin, and this is unique to every student. And this lines up with their follow-up record in CTEIS. And so if you provide this pin to them, they will be able to log into the self-survey form and complete that survey. And the question is, the link the same as this? Yes, it is. And again, I will, when we start looking at I will do a quick step through of the student survey in just a little bit. But just to let you know that that is available. In some districts have been taking advantage of that, and it's working for them. And if you want to do that and you're curious, you can contact the help desk, and we can give you some, ideas of what other districts have done. Or you can talk to other districts, but this is something that some districts have found to be helpful. All right. Many districts will delegate the contacting and surveying of students to teachers or other survey staff. In this case, it's your responsibility, you who are attending this training, to train those interviews in the same ideas and concepts that you're currently being trained in. So regardless of how you are conducting the interviews, whether you are going to be doing them personally yourselves or you're going to be delegating those to others, it's important that everybody knows and reads through the protocol manuals and understands them, and understand the processes that we discuss here. So, this is kind of you could consider this to be a train the trainer session. So we're training you on how to train your interviewers. So a couple of key points when you're either training yourself or training other interviewers, make sure you understand all of the survey forms thoroughly. And as I said before, read the protocol manual thoroughly. And use that alongside with the survey forms so that you understand how they work. You understand what the skip patterns are. As you'll see in a minute, if you answer questions about employment, that will produce further questions about employment. However, if you're not employed, then you won't be asked to answer those questions at all. So it's important that you understand those patterns ahead of time so that you don't get confused while you're actually in the survey. It's also important that you focus just on the conversation you're having with the student, and not on trying to figure out the survey. Again, we can't seem to emphasize this enough. Make every effort to interview the student directly. As In-Chen mentioned, proxies have shown to be having limited information, and the accuracy of their information is in question. And there's a lot of different ways. We've talked to a lot of different districts. A lot of different districts do a lot of different things to set themselves up to make sure that they can contact students. Most of them have some kind of an exit interview process where they collect contact information, knowing that you will need to contact these students. They also let them know ahead of time that someone will be contacting them, so that they're more likely to answer the phone. A lot of districts we've heard will have Facebook groups or use social media to keep track of students in such a way that leads them to makes it easier to find them so that they can be followed up on. So just, try different things. Just, there's a lot of different ways, and the more effort you can have ahead of time, the better. So prepare yourself, prepare the students, get their contact information, and make sure you put it into CTEIS to make sure that it's available. It's also important to be consistent. Make sure that everybody you interview the same way. Don't modify your survey based on who you're talking to. It's very important that every question be asked the same way. This removes any types of influence that the interviewer might have. And it's also important that that we're able to remove any other factors and focus on just the values that we're looking at. As I said, follow the survey wording exactly. Every question must be asked the same way. Even slight deviations can change the meaning of a question or influence a respondent to answer a different way. There is a question at the bottom. Is there a Spanish version of the survey available? There is not, but I will take that up with OCTE and see if we have some resources available to make one available. So we will take a look into that. Just making a note. Some other things to be aware of when you're doing the surveys. Make sure that you are as objective as possible. Keep your voice even. Don't show any emotion or, have any kind of, if you have emotion, then you might change the value of a question. And that might change how someone might answer it. Don't apologize for asking any questions. Some of these questions ask for some personal information. Don't apologize if preempted or anything like that. Just ask the question and and deal with the answer. It's really important that you follow the survey script directly. This survey has been revised and developed over the 20 years, I think, of its existence. To really hone in on the information that's important and to try and get that information. It's also been looked at to ensure that the questions are straightforward and address the issue that they're trying to get at as much as possible. So it's important that you don't stray or don't create your own survey. Make sure you just use the survey script that's available. If you have any questions, as always, contact the SEC or the help desk or contact InChen. If you're not sure who to contact, you can contact the help desk and we will help figure out who you need to ask, put your question to, whether it's a PTD question or an OCTE question. Also, before you finish your survey, make sure you review your forms and make sure you haven't missed anything. If you did skip something, make sure that it was appropriate that you skipped it. And if you have any questions, jot down the nature of the question, and then you can talk to your trainer or the help desk to find out how you should interpret that particular response. Next question. They say, do most schools see a success in answers with teachers calling their own students? I want to say yes. However, we have 300 different districts and everybody does a little bit differently and everybody has different successes. It's some of the questions about how districts do their follow-ups and some of their strategies. What we've done in the past is we've had as part of an opportunity for students or for districts to put forth some of their ideas and some of their strategies, and maybe we'll try and do that again. See, a lot of people are interested in how other districts do their follow-ups and how they find that successful. Maybe we'll look in again. It seems as though that this year there is an emphasis on making sure that your response rates are high and your proxy rates are low. We will look into a way that maybe we can create a best practices document. Maybe we'll survey the districts and find out how they do things, and we can share that with everybody. So I will look into that too. Okay. So moving on, talking about the actual survey question review. The first couple of things, again, you want to make sure that you have your protocol manual around. You want to read through it. You want to make sure that you understand the processes. And then the next thing that you need to look at is the intro script, and which intro script that you want to use, because which intro script can lead into which survey you're using. And I'll make sure before you start doing your surveys, that especially if you plan on doing a block of them, that you have all the materials and all the printed copies that you need. So the introductory script that you will use to begin each of your calls is designed to quickly introduce the survey to the student and get them involved by asking them questions regarding their programs. Notice that there are 3 potential dialogues. They all vary slightly depending on whether you're speaking directly with the student who's only attended one program or had multiple programs, or if you're talking to a proxy. If you're talking to a student that's only completed a single program, you'll begin by saying, in this particular grade, or 12th, 11th grade, and you can fill that in this grade, you achieve concentrator status in a program in this field, for instance, welding. Do you have a few minutes to answer some questions about what you're doing now? All responses will be kept confidential. If your student has, and you know that your student has multiple programs, you'll start instead with, we're talking with students who achieve concentrator status with one or more programs in high school. Do you have a few minutes to answer some questions about what you're doing now? All responses will be kept confidential. Our records show that you were involved in these particular programs, and you can identify the programs. Are you pursuing one of these more than the other? And if the student tells you, yeah, I'm doing this, then you say, well, this is the program that I'd like you to think about during this interview. So you can see you can kind of preload this information for each individual student. There might be a situation where you find yourself speaking with the parent or guardian or a close relative, and you'll start the conversation with, we're talking with students who achieve concentrator status in high school CTE programs to see how they're doing. This student was in this program. How can I reach him or her? And hopefully the parent or guardian will tell you when the most appropriate time is to reach them, and you can jot that down, and then you can follow up at that time. Again, because it's really important that you make several attempts to try and contact the student directly before you fall back into a proxy. If it becomes apparent, though, that the concentrator is unreachable for the duration of the follow-up project, remember, you've got approximately 3 months to do this. You can ask the proxy to take this survey by stating, you could probably answer some of the questions. It would only take a few minutes, and all responses will be confidential. At that point, you can choose which particular survey script that you want to use, the student or the proxy. Then you go into the actual survey itself. And just to make a point, it's very important that you identify if a student has multiple programs, which program they're being surveyed in. And it's also possible that your student may have completed a program in a different district. So they would have 2 programs to choose from, one that was in your district and one that was not. And the student may choose to be followed up in the program that is not in your district. That is fine. You just need to mark that was the program that they chose to be followed up in, and then continue the survey. So if you find yourself on the other end of the completers in another district where you're surveying students in other districts' programs, that's fine. So to work with the follow-up survey, you start with this. If you're interviewing a student directly, you would use this student phone survey, and it's broken up in a couple of different parts. There's 9 questions, 4 main sections, A through D, which refer to different facets of the student's life. And depending on which questions they answer, they probably won't answer all of them. And again, there is some dependencies on the questions. Part A relates to the student's current status. And you start the survey by saying, let's start with what you're doing now. Are you going to school or working? And then you have A through G possible answers. Each one of them has to be answered yes or no. So you can find out whether they're in a training program, a school or a college, an apprentice, working in the military, or doing community service or in the Peace Corps. Each one of these needs to be answered independently. If they choose no to every single one of these, then you can go into the other section and find out if they're not doing any of these items up here in the first part, what are they doing? Are they on unpaid leave of absence? Are they hospitalized? Are they volunteering somewhere except for the Peace Corps and receiving no pay? There might be a situation where you find out that the student is deceased, in which case then you just skip to the end and thank the person and just end the survey right there. But it's important that you have some answer for part A. That is the one question that absolutely needs an answer. If you're unable to get an answer for the part A, then it's considered to be that's a non-contact that needs to be described as to what's the nature of the non-contact. Once they've selected what they're doing, if they've identified that they are in school, then you will go down to part B, where you talk about school or training, and you will ask the question, in the major area of study or training, how much do you use the skills learned in this program? And they can be a lot, some, hardly ever, or never, or hardly ever, or not at all. If they choose hardly ever, not at all, you can follow up with the question, right now you don't use your training, but how much do you anticipate using it in the future? And you only ask that question if they ask hardly ever or not at all. Then you proceed on to where are you going to school? And we need to know whether they're in a business or trade school, community college, a college or university, in a military institute, or something else. We do not need to know the name of the school, just need to know the type of the school. And then lastly, we need to know what type of program they're in. You can ask what type of program they're in and determine whether it's apprenticeship, on-the-job training, a certificate, an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, or some other type of program. And you can write that in. Again, don't necessarily need to know the name of the program. Just need to know the type. And you only ask this question if they identify that they are in school or in training. If they say that they're not, then don't ask any of these questions. And then if they identify that they're working, you will ask questions in section C. So if they're employed, you say, now I'd like to ask you about your job as it relates to your selected program. On your job, how much would you say you're using the skills that you were taught? Again, you got a lot, some, hardly ever, or not at all. You follow this question up with, how strongly do you agree with the statement, I'm satisfied with my present job? Strongly agree, agree, disagree, and strongly disagree. The next question, question 7, is how many hours per week do you work? And we're trying to get an exact number of hours per week. And if they are unable to specifically say that I work 10 hours, 20 hours, 40 hours a week, ask, would you say it's 35 hours a week or more? So you will either be answering the number of hours per week or whether they work more than 35 hours a week or not. And then the last question is, including tips and commissions, how much do you make an hour? And if they, again, we would like to, we do the measurement by hour, but if they're unable, or if it's easier for them to provide a different way of saying it, how much they make per month or per week or per year, make sure that you put that value down there and identify what the delimiter is. And then we will do the math to figure out what that equates to per hour. If they've identified that they're not working, you will ask none of the questions in part C, but you will ask questions in D, asking them whether they're looking for a job. At that point, you're pretty much done with the survey, and you will you'll say, thank you, that's all we need for now. What's the best way to contact you if we need to follow up on this survey? And hopefully that they will put an updated phone number or email in there. That helps if, when we do these, occasionally we do the validation studies, that helps verify the information that they've put in. And now we ask if they have any comments they'd like to help improve the program, and you can take down any comments they might give you. And that pretty much wraps up the survey. Now there's a question. There's a question about individual links in their email. Yes, you would, if you're doing the self-survey, you would want to send a link and the survey pin unique to every student. So it would have to be some type of mail merge. The other question is, do you treat stipends as wages? I believe so. I will double check on that and get back to you, but I am pretty sure that stipends are considered wages and are to be included. All right, so yes, and just more information about the student self-survey. Again, I will address that and just talk about that a little bit more, a little bit later. Just a couple of slides on potential problems, and this stuff is all covered in the protocol manual. You may find that your interviewer is uncomfortable asking about wages because it's kind of a personal question, and they may find different ways to ask it or ways to apologizing for it. We ask that you do not do that and rely on the fact that you are, to be confident that you have permission to ask this information. It's important. And also know that, the student may choose to skip that question or any of these questions. And that's fine. You never want to suggest to a student that they can skip it, but if they don't want to answer it, they don't have to. And just treat it as another question. If you remain casual and non-plussed about it, you can put the student at ease and they're more likely to answer. So, don't make the wage question any more important than any other question. That's the idea. The student or the concentrator may ask a lot of questions before answering. They may want to know, why are you asking this? And just let them know that it helps to know how our students are doing, and it helps to know how our programs are doing. This information goes into helping know that. Who gets this information? This is reported back to the state and back to the districts, but it's very confidential. When the final reports, no names are included, so it'll never get back to them, kind of stuff. Some concentrators may just flat out refuse to answer. Others may be uncertain. As I said before, most of the questions you can, except for question 1, all the questions are optional, but don't ever suggest that they're optional. Don't tell them they don't have to answer if they don't want to. Just let them decide whether they're going to answer or not. And if they choose not to answer it, say, okay, move on. If they're uncertain, especially about wages, tell them to estimate. That's what we can do. There's more tips like this in the protocol manual, so be sure to look through that. This just goes back to reiterate the importance of the response rates. And I think this might need to be a little bit updated based on some of the information that InChen put out. But again, if you're 100%, good job, you're doing great. It's acceptable response rate is maybe it's like showing here at 90 to 100, and maybe I think now we're up to 80 to 100. But if you're below 50, that puts you in non-compliance, and you're inviting all sorts of attention that you might not want. So ways to improve response rates. Again, as I said before, try and get all your student information ahead of time, prepare them, let them know that this is coming, try and get good contact information before they leave school. A lot of high schools have high school emails, and you realize that once students leave high school, then they probably don't use the high school email anymore. So try and get alternate emails. Make sure you try to contact them multiple times. Again, a good idea is to call people from your school so that they'll see that on their caller ID and they're more likely to answer. So there are a lot of different ideas on how to improve your response rates. And yes, we will update this slide. And again, the protocol manual has a whole bunch of tips in there. So, refer to the protocol manual for improving response rates. All right. So there's a couple of questions about how the self-survey works. So we'll kind of do a sidestep into that real quick. If, so I don't want to go there, I want to go to here. All right. So in your follow-up report, you will have, you will have a student's email ideally, and then you will have in this column here, and then you will also have the survey pin. So if the emails are all good, then you could create a mail merge where you get a separate email or printed letter with the specific student's information on it, along with their specific pin. The pins are unique to a student. And what happens is you would create an email that would have the link to student follow-up.ctis.com. And then you would say, greetings, John Smith. We ask you to participate in the follow-up. Please go to CTEIS studentfollow-up.ctis.com and enter this PIN number in. And what they will see is, if I go to, hang on a second. They go to CTEIS-studentfollow-up.com, they will be allowed to stick their PIN in there. And once they put their PIN in there, then they will be able to do the survey. And if you're curious what the student will see, if you go to the knowledge base, you can look at the follow-up self-survey guide. And this is what the student will see. So the first thing they will be prompted with that page I just showed you. They'll enter their PIN number in there, And again, that PIN number is specific for a student. So you need to make sure if you're doing a mail merge that you're giving the students the correct PINs. But one of the first questions that they are asked is, please verify that this is who you are, just in case that someone, the PIN numbers are crossed. But then you'll go in through, you'll verify your information. It'll identify possible PSNs or possible programs. They can update some contact information like what phone numbers or emails, and then they'll choose which survey they want to do. And then they will get a survey, which will, a very similar survey to what the rest of what it looks like when you use CTEIS. And if they can go into detail into that. Yeah, there's we're updating these links. I apologize that these will be by the afternoon. These will all be updated, but it goes into detail on each section of that, kind of like that we've gone into details and explains from the protocol manual each one of them. So if a student is curious on what they're going to see or how they're supposed to do it, they can go to here, or you can go here and take a look at what the student's going to see. Okay. So now at this point, you have presumably surveyed all your students. And if you're doing it by phone, you have them all on paper and you need to transcribe them all into CTEIS. So you need to go into CTEIS. I'm going to switch back to CTEIS. Go back to here. So I go to my data entry and my follow-up, and it will give me the list of buildings. I choose the building that I'm interested in, and I click on the phone link, and it will give me the list of all the students. And again, the status column will tell me whether somebody has been surveyed or not. And you'll see that for this student here that has completed a survey, I can go in and I can review the survey. When I go that, it will give me a list of all the answers that they've conducted. And it gives me the option to redo the survey if I need to. So I'll come back here and pull up my survey list. So if there is this particular student, I have his records and I want to enter his data, I click on survey. The first question has the ability to double check that his phone numbers are correct. And again, we do this for the potential for doing the validation surveys or some other need to update them after this follow-up. You can add additional contact information in here if it's necessary. If you find that the student is unable to be contacted for some reason and proxies are not available, you need to enter in the reason. If the phone was disconnected and you have no way to try and connect them, or if they have no phone, or if they just flat out refused, or if you're absolutely unable to locate, they moved, you have wrong numbers, or it may be possible that they're still in school. Every year there's a handful of students that are marked as having left school, but by the time the next school year starts, they come back to school for some reason. So you may find someone on your list that is actually still in school when you call them up, in which case then you can mark here still in school. And this does, if they're still in high school, doesn't count against response rate. So you can make those, so I can come in here and I can say, all right, this is a wrong number, and then have save. And I can say it was saved. It was changed to non-contact. If I come back to here and pull up my list again, you can see that this student is now a non-contact. If I go to the next student, I look through here and I see that everything looks good. I want to go begin the survey. The first thing I need to do is identify this particular student was in 3 different programs. So I need to identify which program he chose to be surveyed under. So I'll say welding. And then I identify what the survey type is. Am I talking to the student directly? Am I talking to a relative or a proxy? Or is this, did I get a mail result? So I'll say by student. And you'll notice that if you choose proxy, you don't get all the same questions either. The main questions are, as I'll show you in a minute, have to do with the gauging stuff. All right, so the first question is, let's start with what you're doing now. Are you working? And I can choose, all of the section 1A questions. You'll notice that I don't have any other questions on here until I answer some of these questions. So I'll say, if I answer yes to all of them, that I'm in school and I'm in an apprenticeship. If I'm in an apprenticeship, it automatically says, you're working. And it could be in military. And if I'm full-time military, then I can't possibly be part-time military. And maybe I'm volunteering in a lot of different places. So I'm trying to do everything. If I put that in there, it identifies that I am in school. So it gives me the school questions, and I am working. So it gives me the working questions. It doesn't give me the question about whether I'm looking for employment. And then I'm pretty much done. So if I choose no on all of these, that the student says they're not doing any of this stuff, then I get the other down at the bottom where I can choose which one of the other things that they're doing. So I can identify what's going on in here. But if I choose, if I say that I am in college and I am working, then I will get the opportunity to answer both the in school and the employment questions. And I can choose, in this case, if I choose hardly ever, then I get the sub question about whether you're going to anticipate using this stuff in the future. If you're going to school, I say where you're going to school, then identifies which type. If you choose other, then you'll be asked to enter something in here. And if I could choose the type of training I'm in, and that completes the school part. If I'm doing employment, it's going to ask me how much I'm using my skills, how much I enjoy my job, how much I work a week, and you put in the hours in here, or you can identify whether it's greater or less than 35 hours a week, and then you can put in your, identify what how many wages you're working. If I put in something that's a little bit high, it's going to warn me saying $5,000 a week, that's pretty high for someone coming out of high school. Are you sure? It's not going to stop you from doing it, but it's going to make you double check. And again, if I had answered no to working, you'll notice that I lose the employment section, and now it can ask me whether I'm currently working. And so that there is, as you notice, that there is a dependency on how you answer questions, and this should coincide with what you find on the paper, on your paper survey. Then when you're done, you can enter in, how you contacted them, when you completed the survey, and other information that you can put in here that is useful for some of the reports that we run. And then we ask for the follow-up information. If everything is entered into the survey completely, then it will mark it as completed, and you can review it or you can redo it. If you redo it, it's going to erase the previous survey and make you start over. And then that allows me to come back to here, and I can keep going on. So this is how you enter in your survey data into CTEIS. Now there's a question that stated that some teachers were using the self-survey to enter in their results. That is definitely not what we would like you to do, because we do special type of reporting and checks on self-survey students, and that would be skewing the data to let as we try and gauge the efficacy and the utility and how much people are using self-survey. It will skew that data. And so yes, please tell your staff not to use the self-survey to enter in student data. We have looked into providing a website for teachers to enter their data directly. but that's still in discussions, and that may be something that we provide in the near future. But yes, please do not encourage or let your teachers, your staff use the self-survey unless it's actually a student doing it, because that will skew up our data. All right. All right. So once all your data has been entered in, then you're going to want to complete the report. And to complete the report means that you've done all of the surveys you're going to do for your building, and you want to let the appropriate people know that that building is completed. To do that, you'll go into CTEIS, and in your data entry selection, you'll say building follow-up review. And this will provide again, if you select your district, in this case, that you might have multiple districts that you're responsible for, but it'll list all the buildings in that district, and it'll tell you the current status. The approval process starts within the building, is done by the building reporter, is then notifies the fiscal agent, who then will review it, and if it all looks good, submit it to the CPID administrator. And then the CPID administrator will review it, and if everything looks good, they'll submit it to OCTE. And this little grid right here will show you where each one of these statuses are. And right now, as a building reporter, before you're allowed to mark the building complete, you have to validate it. In this case, to validate it, you have to view the response rates. So, and actually, let's do this one here. So in this particular building, there is only one program, and there's a total of 18 students. And you can see, we're working on some of these colors here to make this a little bit easier to read, that 14 out of the 18, 14 are still in the initial status, 2 have completed. We have 0 self surveys, 2 non-contacts. So when it comes to having either contacted or marked as non-complete, we've only addressed 22% of the students. And if I try and mark this now complete, it'll come back and say unable to complete, not all surveys are completed. So this number has to be up to 100%. 100% of all the students either have to be surveyed or marked as non-contact. Now keep in mind, this percent complete is not your blanking on the term, your response rate. This is just how many that you've completed. Your response rate is actually the total number of completed in self divided by non-completed. That is your response rate. However, you will be required to address every single student before you can submit your report. And yes, there is a request to put in the proxy rate into this report, and we're looking into adding that. So once you fill that out, you can mark this complete, and it'll show up complete here, and it will notify the fiscal agent that they can do the same process, as we'll see in a minute. Couple of questions real quick. Please add the proxy rate to the review screen. We intend to do that. We're trying to get that in early this year, but basically it will show what your proxy rate versus and also what your response rate is. So trying to make this particular report a little more helpful. And hopefully we can get to that fairly soon. Another question is, do you know when the online survey goes live so we can send it out to students' personal email to fill out? The online survey, the self-survey, is available right now. And when we push out the follow-up list this afternoon, it will include all of the pins necessary for students to conduct the self-survey. So those two things, the self-survey is available right now, and the pins will be available this afternoon. So you should be able to get started this week on contacting your students, inviting them to do the self-survey. Second part of the question also, is there a way that we can download which students responded to the survey link so I don't resend it to them? If you go to your data entry and your follow-up and you look at a particular building, you can either do this through follow-up list or just look directly on here. You can see the ones, if they've completed it, it will say self here. And if it says self here, it means that they've completed the survey. It won't tell you whether they just opened it and closed it and did nothing. It will only tell you if they completed it. And you can see that either here on this list or when you do an export, you'll get the follow-up status, and I export that to Excel. I open that up, and it will tell you in this column here, I think it's the same spreadsheet, but in this column here, it will tell you what the completion status is of every student. And if they've done a self-survey, that will say self. So hopefully you can use this to identify which students have completed a self-survey. But like I said, it only will tell you if they completed it. If they've opened it, started it, and then quit, it won't tell you that. All right. So after you use this tool to complete the report, once you've completed the report, if you are a fiscal agent or a CPID, then you'll be responsible to do something very similar. In this case, if you have the fiscal agency role or a CPID administrator role, you will come in here and you will choose your district follow-up review, in which case you will get to choose your district, and then you'll see a similar screen, and then you'll identify, if the building is completed, then I'll be able to continue to process and mark it completed from the fiscal agent. So this is what you do, something very similar if you're a fiscal or if you're a CPID. In addition, if you go to the follow-up page, there's some guides for fiscals and CPIDs on how to do the review for follow-up. The last step is once all the data is in, then we do the reports. There are three main reports. There's the XO 610, which is the placement summary of concentrators by program, the XO 611, the education and employment comparison report, the T1608, which is just a compilation of all the follow-up responses. So that's one set of reports. As mentioned earlier, we also have within the CPIs or the core performance indicators, we have the new 3S1 indicator, which will report on placement in terms of the core performance indicators. These can be found in a couple of different places. You can go to CTEIS.com within CTEIS and go to the reports tab. You can find these at reports.cetis.com, and you can find CPI information at analytics.cetis.com. So we take a quick look at that. If we go into here, if we go into reports and we go to the follow-up reports, you can choose the 610, the 611, or the 1608, and a little bit of definition of each. You can choose what level you want it. Do you want it statewide, region-wide, cluster-wide, CPID-wide, fiscal agency-wide, building-wide, or zip code-wide? And I can go in here and I can just say, all right, I want it statewide for the 610. And it'll pop up and it'll load the report. It'll come up here in a second. The other option is you can do it if you go to reports.cetis.com and we go to the follow-up surveys, click on that. You can then again choose statewide. You run it here. And this is basically the same report. And you can zoom in and on a little bit. It goes through and does an analysis of the specific questions and tells you the concentrators, responses, and the percentages. So you can look at that. You also have the 611, which is a comparison where a lot of information here is put in a different grid for comparison. You also have analytics, which is where you'll find our dashboards. And from here, you can find we're transitioning into the new ones, but we have a placement rate. So you can find out what the placement rates based on the core performance indicators are. So this is a way that you can find out how the CPIs are working. So those are a lot of the reports that are available to you. Last thing, again, this is all depend on a lot of different timelines. This is in the protocol manual, I think, and in the other manual. Basically, it starts in September. Get yourself, or starts in the previous year when your students are graduating. Make sure you get their information, warn them, let them know. Then you actually do the follow-up in the winter following they left school. So you do all the follow-up, and then you collect all the data. We crunch all the data to February and March, and then we try and get the reports out in late spring to early summer, depending on how how much we get all the everybody gets the reports in on time. The 2021 CPI data is not available yet. We're getting very close, but we're not quite there yet. We're actually farther ahead this year, I think, than we have been in previous years, but we're doing pretty good. We're almost there with it, and it will use all the Perkins 5 definitions. So that kind of finishes up what we're going to talk about. Again, remember, lots of resources available to you. Start with support.cetis.com or the help desk. Look for the follow-up list to be published later on this afternoon, hopefully right after lunch, and get going. And hopefully it will be a nice and smooth follow-up. And at this point, I guess I throw it open to any questions. And if you don't have any questions, when you close this window, you should get prompted to do a training evaluation. And we would love for you to fill that out and submit your thoughts and comments to help us make sure that we're providing you with the type of support material that you need. If you don't see that when you close the window, then we will send you a link that will invite you to do the training. So, and thank you all for attending, and have a great year. I will stay on the line if anybody has any questions.